What I'm going to show you now is an app, a full app. I call this app ShowTime. The goal of this app is to provide an interface for the user to show the date and to show the time independent of each other based on switches. So let's go ahead and start by dragging a switch over from the object library, search for switch, and go ahead and drag it onto the storyboard. So let's have this one be the date switcher, and it's going to be labeled show date. As you can see, that text is a little bit too big, so I'm going to change the font on it, change it to subhead. That looks better. I'm going to pretty much leave everything else alone, and then I'm going to search for a date control. Let me drag it onto the storyboard, and the date control, since it's specific to a date, let's leave the date to short and the time to none. Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and set the date to medium. That looks a little bit better. Okay, the font on that looks fine, so we can leave it. Let's go back. Oops, and go to switch. And this will now represent, well, let's go back. Let's just handle the date up until this point. So we've got a date switch, and we've got, a date switch, and then the date itself. So if you pull up the assistant editor and go ahead and control click and drag an outlet into our controller. Let's call this one the date switch. Make sure it's an outlet, and let's drag this date onto the controller as well. And this is the date itself. Okay. Now we want an action to happen when we want to hook into the action that happens when somebody switches the value here. So let's go ahead and drag an action into our controller. So go ahead and make sure the connection is set to action. Give it a name. So this one is the date switch. Let's go ahead and call it date switch tapped. Connect it. So what do we want to do? Looks like we're past a value that's of type Boolean, which is the value of the switch, whether it's set or not. So let's go ahead and based on that value, we're going to make a decision. So we're going to change whether or not the date that we've got set up will be set to hidden or not. So let's go ahead and get a hold of date, set hidden, and it takes in a Boolean. So if someone taps the show date switch, the value is going to be passed to us. So the value here, say they tapped it and it was false, meaning the switch was turned off. So what we want to do is then set hidden to true. So what we can do is just not the value, and that should do it for us. Because in the other case, it's just the reverse. When the switch is turned on, we want to set the hidden value to not be true. So otherwise, set it hidden to false or on. So let's go ahead and run this. See if it works. Show date shows up, shows the current date. Let's go ahead and turn it off, and it hides it. Turn it on, it brings it back. Okay. So let's go ahead and do the same type of thing, but with the time. Let's drag another switch onto there. This one we're going to call ShowTime. Set the value of the font to something a little smaller. Leave everything else there. And let's go ahead and set, let's add another date. This time we're going to set the date to be none and leave the time, but let's make it medium as well. Now that looks a little ugly. Let's just go ahead and leave it as short. Okay. Now we're going to do the similar thing where we drag outlets into our controller. This one is the time switch. Go ahead and connect it. And let's drag this date onto there, and this actually, we'll just call this one the time. Okay. Now we need to hook into the action that occurs when this switch is tapped. So let's go ahead and drag an action onto here. And let's call this time switch tapped. Make sure it's in action. Click connect. And in this method, we're going to want to do the same thing. We're going to say time.setHidden equals to value, the value that gets passed it. Oops, sorry, not value. Okay, let's go ahead and run that and see what happens. App launches. Okay. Let's make sure the date still works. Yep, and it hides it. Let's make sure time turns off, and it does. Let's turn off both of them, and that works. Turn on one, that works. Turn on the other, that works. Turn on both, and they both work. So there you go. There is our ShowTime app, and hopefully that gives you an indication of how you would create something similar. It's a very simple app, but we walked through connecting outlets, connecting actions, setting values based on actions that occur, and focusing a little bit on a couple different controls, the switch control and the date control. And that's it.